Hi, in today's video we're going to talk about how we can create and edit Microsoft Teams meetings through our Power App. I'm currently building a Power App for a customer when they had the need to create Microsoft Teams meetings from inside the app, but also sometimes do some changes in the app and that to reflect in Microsoft Teams in the already created meeting. I was inspired by Shane Young's video on how to create Teams meetings from within the app, but I was missing the part where you can go back and edit an already created meeting. So I did some research and I got it to work, and I want to share it with you. So stick around, give it a thumbs up if you like the video, and make sure to subscribe. So here we are within the app, and as you can see, I've already put something together. I have here on the top left side a couple of inputs like subject, start time, end time, and participants. I want the meeting to be able to write. I want to be able to write the subject in the meeting, start and end time, of course, and also put the participants. You can do much more, like create the body, HTML, and so on and so forth. But I will leave that with you. I'm just going through the basics so that we can take a look on how we can create the meeting and also update the meeting. I want to share with you also the video that inspired me, as I said, from Shane Young. It's this one here, Create Teams Meeting Link from Power Apps and Power Automate for Outlook. He's showing here how to create the team meeting, but he's not showing how you can edit that meeting. So that's the most important part of my video. So I will not go deeply through the create meeting part, as you can see it also from Shane, but we can take a look on that, how it's done. And as you can see here, I need to have my my calendar so that I can select the meeting I want to update. The update meeting functionality requires the meeting ID so that we can find it in Outlook and then update it. As I said, here are some simple inputs, and in the create meeting part, we have the code that Shane Young shows there as well. It begins by putting the whole code in a variable. So he named it also set var meeting, and then we begin with the actual Microsoft Teams connector, which is the Microsoft Teams.create Teams meeting. First, you need the calendar ID. Because I started with only the creation of the meeting, I did not have the drop down here where I select the calendar ID. I manually do a lookup here in my Office 365 Outlook with the calendar get tables.value, and then I search for my calendar with the display name equals calendar. We can also change that to the drop down that I have here. This one gives back the ID as well. Yeah, from that we need the name. Next, text underscore subject dot text is the one from my input here, where I just write the subject so that I can see it on my calendar. After the next semicolon, by the way, we have here semicolons because my Power Apps is in German. And yeah, after that one, the connector requires the body. In the body, this is prefix. I don't think you should change that. And we open the curly brackets here, and we need to input or to give the content and the content type. The content can be, of course, dynamic. You can have that from a rich text and so on. In my case, I'm not editing the body, so I just put this is a test meeting here as a static string, and the content type has to be HTML. The next part is the time zone. There is a list of time zones somewhere at Microsoft documentation. I need to take a look. Maybe I think Shane Young put this also in his description. Let's take a look. Yeah, there it is. So since he mentioned that this is the Microsoft time zone index values, and I went and got mine for my time zone, which is Berlin, Rome, Stockholm, and so on. So which is W.Europe Standard Time, and that one I put here in quotes. And yeah, so that's the time zone. I will try to put this also in my description. Next, we have the start time. The start time is a little bit more complicated because you need to start with the curly brackets, because this is, I think, a record. And then you have to tell Teams that this is the date time property that it's receiving. Why is it showing here? Weird. And next, since we have 3 drop downs, let me scroll up. As you can see here, these are the 3 drop downs that come from the start time. We have to somehow bring this together in the correct format for Teams. And what I do here is I do a datetime value where I bring the values for date, start hour, and start minute together, and then I format this in this format. But it's necessary for Teams to recognize it as a date and time value. And the same I do for the end time. Now, once for the start time and once for the end time with the end time drop downs here. Next, Teams is requiring if this is an online meeting, you should put true there, because otherwise this, I think, will just create a calendar entry but will not make this an online meeting. You need Teams to create the online meeting URL for your participants to join. And I think this is the part where Teams goes and does that. So make sure you put true here. And then the semicolon requires the online meeting provider, which is Teams for Business. Put this in quotes and make sure you write it in camel case, so for big and business also. And next, it requires additional information, or this is not mandatory. So you can put here additional information like the body and so on and so forth. As you can require attendees, optional attendees, location, and so on. So these are all, I think, optional information. And like it's all day, it says there, importance, recurrence, and so on. You can put here a lot of information. But in my case, I just entered here the required attendees from my participants dropdown. And since it requires the emails separated with a semicolon, I went and did a concat on my dropdown for the selected items. And I grab the email from that concat and I separate them with a semicolon. And that's how my Teams connector accepts the creation of the meeting. And if I go on and test it now, let's put here test subject YouTube, and I want to do a meeting for the 25th of January. 10 o'clock is okay. And make sure that you put the correct date, and let's leave it as it is. I will invite one test less. So we have 2 tests here. I'll select create meeting. I haven't built in a spinner or a loading screen and so on, but it didn't throw up an error. So if I go to my calendar and take a look, as you can see here, the test subject YouTube was just created with the 2 tests. This is a test meeting, which is a static string value I pass, 10 to 12, and I have the link to join the meeting, which is as it should be. So the next part is the one where we go on and update the meeting. To do so, I will make sure that I delete this one here and this one here as well, and we can go on and build it together. So I could have kept the icon. I think we can do that again real quick. There it is. So I will copy this button so that I can reuse it, and instead of create meeting, this will be my update meeting button. So let's make this a little bit bigger. So next I want to have a drop down so that I can select my calendar. Probably you also have multiple calendars in your Outlook, and you want to select the right one for the gallery then to display the items or the events which are in that calendar. I will go on and select a simple drop down, put it somewhere here. And make sure that you have the connectors here already established. The first one is Microsoft Teams, which obviously you need for the creation of the meeting. And since the Microsoft Teams connector does not allow you to edit a meeting, at least I couldn't find a solution to that, I'm utilizing the Office 365 Outlook connector for finding my calendar, my events, and also editing them. So I want here my dropdown to have the Office 365 Outlook, and I want here to have the calendar get tables, close that, value. And if I open that, it's empty. Why it's empty? Probably because it's displaying the wrong items. And I don't want the ID, I want the names. So as you can see here, I have these 4 calendars, and I want to go to my standard calendar. No? It's called calendar. So I have selected the calendar, and if we take a look here, we have multiple calendars. No? And what I want to do next is I want to have a gallery. Let's grab a gallery, put it here below. And I don't want an image, I want a title and undertitle and subtitle, so that it will display the subject, start time and end time. At least that I have, that's so that it's easy for me to find my event. So for my gallery items, I want to have the events. So for that, I need to utilize the Office 365 Outlook connector again. And then I need to go and find the calendar items. So it now asks for a table. The table is my calendar. So since data is saved in a table, and that's my calendar, and my table is called calendar, I need to give the ID of that table. So the ID will come from my dropdown, which is this one, I imagine, dropdown 2, I didn't rename it, dot selected, and then dot ID. So we have here ID, name and owner. I need the ID for this selection or for this connector, and then dot value. So this now will connect to my calendar and will bring the data into my gallery, as you can see. But I need to fix this because I don't want this one to be this item.body preview. I want this to be the subject. And this one should be the start. And if I can make this a little bit bigger, I can copy and paste the start time and change it to end time. Okay, so now I have my calendar entries. And as you can see here, this is the latest one. That's why it's showing up at the top. This is the latest entry, the one we just created. And now I need to update this meeting. So I'm going to go to this button. This is my update meeting button, and this is my from the create meeting, because I copied, and I will delete that. So what we need to start with here is with the Office 365 Outlook connector. We need to reference that, and the next part is to patch the changes. If I search for patch, as you can see here, we have multiple, and I want here the calendar patch item, but the newest one, which is V3. Well, we have also a V4. Let's test the V4. Okay, so the table again is going to come from my dropdown to .selected.id. Then we need the ID of the element of the event that we need to update, and that's going to come from my gallery. We have here my gallery 2.selected.id. And if we maybe mark it here, it's not showing anything, but we can check that in a second. Next we need the subject, and the subject will be coming again from my subject text. I think I've renamed that. So this is the text_subject dot text. Next, it's requiring the start time. If we go to my create meeting action, we have here the start and end time. Keep in mind that when you create a meeting in Microsoft Teams with a Teams connector, it is requiring this record with a date time key, and this will be then the value, no? The key value pair. But with the update functionality of Outlook, it just requires the start time and the end time. So for that reason, I'm going to copy this part and leave the datetime colon away, and we'll paste it in here. So this is my start time. The same is going to happen with my end time. I'm copying that part and pasting it here. Next, it's requiring the time zone. The time zone, we also have it here. So let's copy this one and paste it there. Semicolon. And now we can enter the required attendees and so on, the changes that are optional. So because this part here is mandatory, now we have the optional part. And if I open the curly brackets, I can select here my attendees, my required attendees. And again, I'm going to copy that part from the create meeting, and not the record again, not the key value pair, which requires attendees column, but only the concat, which I'm doing there. I'm going to paste that in there. I need to close the curly bracket and then close the parentheses for the Outlook connection. I'm going to format the code so that it's a little bit better visible. As you can see here, this is our patch item in the calendar action or code. If I close this, we can give it a try. This is my test subject YouTube that I just created. And if I select this now, we should be able to see that the ID of my table is this one, and this is the ID from my item from this one here, because this is the one I just selected. So now the data is in my update meeting action. It's filled out here, and the text is test subject YouTube, which I'm going to change now to 2, so that we know that's the new one. And if we take a look, this one is my test subject YouTube 2 subject text. I'm going to change the time as well. I don't want it to be on at 10 o'clock anymore. I will keep the day. I want to move it to, I don't know, 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock. And I'm going to invite another test, I don't know, test new name. So keep in mind, we added a new participant, we changed this to 2, and we moved to 1 to 2 o'clock on the same day. If I select update meeting, this is now running, and it looks like it didn't complain. And if I take a look on my calendar, it just moved it from, I think it was 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. As you can see here, it brought the new name, which is a new name at my company.de. It moved it to 1 o'clock, and it changed the subject. Again, the body stayed static since we didn't do any changes there, but at least we can now do changes to our Teams meetings. And imagine having a SharePoint list, at least for my use case for the customer. I have a SharePoint list where I save where this meeting has to be created based on another process. And when I create the meeting, I save the meeting ID and the meeting URL in that SharePoint list item. And when I want to do changes, the user has to select that particular SharePoint list item and do the changes there. For example, start time, end time, participant, and so on, and subject. And the meeting ID is already saved there. So I don't have to go through the selection of the gallery anymore. I can just utilize that ID and do the editing. and I can select, for example, or I can do an if condition in my save button or in my create meeting, and say if the meeting ID, which is either saved in my list item or not, if that is empty, then I need to create the meeting. If that is not empty and it has something like, if it has something, it has then the ID, then it should update the meeting, which is pretty simple. And yeah, so you don't need two buttons. You do that with one button. And yeah, so I think that's it for this video. It's a short one, but I think a pretty helpful one, because I was struggling to find a way to edit my meetings with the Teams connector, but it looks like the Teams connector is limited on that aspect, and you can go on and use the Microsoft Office 365 Outlook connector and use the calendar patch item. I've tried it also with the V3 version. This is the V4. The only difference I found out is that the V3 does not require the time zone. The V4 does require the time zone. But again, you have the time zones listed here in this link. I will make sure that I put this in my description as well. And again, shout out to the video from Shane Young, which inspired me to do the create meeting and inspired me as well to find out how to edit the meeting. So thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. If you did so, make sure you give it a thumbs up and share it, subscribe to the channel, whatever you want. And yeah, catch you on the next one.